So as you probably heard, today is Pledge Sunday. Really what that means is we've been in this pledge campaign, and the theme of this campaign has been resilient. And so what I want to do today is just tell you a bit more of a story of how Aldea has been resilient through the years. But then really, it's an opportunity for us to look at this journey of a community and really see our own journey and how we all have resilience and spiritual resilience that shows up throughout our lives and will continue to show up. So I hope, if nothing more, than that you experience your own journey mirrored back to you. If you're new today, or you're not really thinking about the pledge, or you've already made your pledge, I don't want you to spend any time worrying or thinking about it. The reality is that in this community, we don't talk about money a whole lot. And so we do take, these very specific times where we're just using this as an opportunity to be clear about where we are as a community and to have some transparency. So I give you permission today to kind of tune out the things that don't feel like they apply to you and just to enjoy and take from it any kind of spiritual inspiration or encouragement that you might need. The reality is, again, like I said, it's about transparency. It's not about selling anyone anything, because that to me just sounds like my worst nightmare would be standing up here trying to sell anyone anything. I think that I would be the worst salesman in the world. I was thinking about this today. If I was a car salesman, I think that I would end up convincing people to keep the car that they have, Like, you don't want this. Like, you're good. You don't need. So that's not what I'm here to do at all today, because we all know the difference, right? And we know when we're being sold something. When Olivia and I moved to Tucson, we took our first trip up to Sedona. We got to our hotel, we checked in, and then next to the check-in booth, there was someone sitting at a desk kind of off to the side, and they were like, come here. Hey, come over here. And we were like, okay. And we kind of probably already should have noticed the red flag here. So we were like, all right, I don't know what this desk is. And then the person said, hey, do you want to go on a Jeep tour up on the Mogollon Rim for a quarter of the price? And we were like, yeah, we do, And they said, great, you're all signed up. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. What's the catch? And they're like, oh, it's nothing. Just show up tomorrow at 8 a.m. at this place that we've marked, right? And you're just going to hear a short presentation. And it's going to be, it's all, And we looked at each other, and we kind of were like, oh, I guess this is what it means to be an adult. We've officially, we've been invited to a timeshare presentation. It's a rite of passage, right? So we went, and I'm proud to say that we did not partake in any Hilton Grand Vacation points. But if you're out there and you have points, more power to you. I'm glad, I hope it worked out for you. But I say all that to say that we know the difference, right? We have that radar. And today, again, all I'm here to share is the journey that we've been on and where we're going. And this word resilient and the significance of it is because the story of Aldea is a story of resilience. And the reality is, I've only been here for a small part of that journey, so it's an honor and a privilege and something even a little bit I feel out of my depth talking about this beautiful history of resilience. But what's interesting is I want to talk about resilience from a little bit of a different perspective than the way in which we normally do. Because in life, we often think of someone who's resilient as someone to whom things might happen and then boom, they just bounce right back to the way things were. In that, the symbol that we often use for resilience is a spring, right? Where, it gets bent out of shape and then boom, it can just move right back into its original shape. Or you might think about resilience when you're watching football. And if you're like me, you see these players get hit so hard multiple times and then they get right back up as if nothing had happened. Most of the time. And for me, I realized this a couple years ago. I was watching football and I realized, wow, if I got hit as hard as any of these players get hit many times, if I got hit that hard once, I'd be in bed for a whole week. So that's a type of resilience that I don't know. But today, really, we're going to be talking about resilience through this more scientific nature lens, because in nature, resilience is about adaptation. Right? It's not just about bouncing back to the way things were. It's about finding a new normal and adapting. Because what happens in nature is that ecosystems are hit with disturbances, right? So there's a forest and then there's a forest fire, or there's a plain and then there's a flood. There's a desert hit with a drought, right? And the ecosystem doesn't just bounce right back to the way things were. It adapts, it adjusts, it expands, right? And so when a forest gets hit with a forest fire, it doesn't just go back to being the exact same forest that it was. It goes through this long process of adaptation, and it becomes something new while still holding on to the essence of what it was and what its function was. And if we're going to talk about forests, then we're going to need to talk about lodgepole pine trees. Any lodgepole pine tree fans out there? Just a few. I thought there'd be more arborist kind of super fans. Okay, just a few. Well, if you're familiar with the lodgepole pine, what you might know is that it has a cone which releases seeds only when exposed to the extreme heat of a fire. So it has this adaptation to know how to survive and continue and create new life out of the ashes, right? There's a resurrection built into the system, even when faced with death. And so it's adapted to the worst case scenario. I don't imagine that a lodgepole pine in any way is preferring a fire or asking for a fire to come. But if that situation occurs, it has that adaptation. And I think about the beautiful saguaros that dot our landscape and how they are attuned to survive through dry periods, through drought, right? They have shallow roots so that even in very brief moments of rainfall, they can still absorb water, and then they can retain that water for up to a year. I don't think that the saguaros prefer a drought or prefer a lack of rainfall, but if it comes to that, they have adaptations. The thing about adaptations is that they arise in nature, they arise within us when the external situation can't be changed, right? When you look out and you realize the situation that I am, I can't control it. And at that point, the individual or the community or the ecosystem or the organism must adapt to that environment. And to me, it echoes of what Viktor Frankl says. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning in a Concentration Camp, he says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. How many of us this resonates in some way or another with how you've been feeling over the past couple weeks, past couple months? We just finished this short series, Politica, where we were talking about kind of just our emotions and holding space for how the various ways you might feel in response to the election. And I had a friend who messaged me and he said, you could just keep doing Politica, like Politica part 49. You just keep going, you know. Aldea could just be Politica. But here's the reality. Part of how you might be feeling right now is this sense that there isn't going back to normal, right? There isn't changing this situation in a way to make it what I want it to be, right? And perhaps it's recognizing that there is only a new normal to point towards, right? And yet, like the adaptations and the resilience of ecosystems, even in that new normal, you still retain an essence of who you are, a core of who you are. Because even when a forest burns down, it doesn't turn into necessarily a desert. It has the opportunity to stay a forest, but to become a very different kind of forest, perhaps, right? And so the DNA to be a forest still remains. That essence is still there. And friends, you and I, we are like ecosystems in this way, right? And the communities that we're part of are like ecosystems in this way because disruptions in life are guaranteed. And the invitation is to find our way to a new normal while holding on to who we are and who we've always been. So perhaps you lost someone and you knew in that moment there was no going back to the way things were. And you had to explore, if I am to move forward, how can I still be authentic to who I am while acknowledging this new normal I'm about to enter into, right? these things happen. And on some deep level, you remain you, but something also changes. Perhaps you're like me, and in some way or another, you lost your faith or had a shifting and expanding of your faith, and you knew it just wasn't coming back in the way you once held it. And yet, in that new spirituality, or in that new way of being that developed in your heart, you found it to actually ring truer to who you've always been, because that core, that essence remained. And this, friends, in so many ways, echoes the story of Aldea. 17 years ago, Aldea was a different community. It was called Community Church of the Foothills, and it was an evangelical Christian community. And the founder of Aldea, Kevin Skinner, and the leaders and the leadership team of Aldea had the courage to make a shift and an evolution into what our motto is today, love, period, right? And in becoming Aldea and adopting this motto, a major part of this was saying that the hill that they were going to die on was that of inclusion, of belonging, of openness, right? To those who have been on the margins, right? To those who are in the LGBTQIA plus community, those who are transgender. It's Transgender Week of Visibility right now. And it's moments like that and things like that that fueled this shift and evolution. And to say that we would be a community that would welcome people of all backgrounds, all spiritual backgrounds, all ways of life. And this was a shift and a movement from one place to another. And this movement was naturally a disruption to the status quo, just like an ecosystem is hit with a disturbance. Friends, sometimes the disruptions that we go through in life seem as though they're threatening our very existence. How many of us have had moments and experiences where you look at your life and you wonder, how am I going to move forward? How am I going to continue? What will life possibly look like now? It rings of what the Buddhist teacher Pema Chödrön says, only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us. Friends, sometimes it's only when we are faced with the unthinkable that an unbelievable courage rises up within us. It's only when we experience a forest fire that the lodgepole pine within us releases a seed of hope and of possibility. It's only when we're faced with a drought that the resilience of the saguaro comes through in our lives. And it's only when faced with disruptions that we recognize how resilient we actually are. And so in this moment in Aldea's history, right, of being radically inclusive and the disruption that followed, people started leaving because love, period, wasn't what everyone signed up for. How many of us have evolved, changed, shifted, moved forward in life? And as you did, not everyone in your life could join you for that part of your journey, right? You grow, you see something in a new way, and not everyone can come along. And it's okay, right? You love them. You thank them for what they've been in your journey, but it's just how it works, right? Some people aren't there all the way. And what you might have found is that was okay. You could look at that and embrace that because it also showed you the truth and the poignancy of where you were going. And so I'll fast forward a little bit because Aldea, as a community that's been around for decades now, there's so many stories, so many micro journeys along the way, and so I can't possibly cover all of the beautiful things that have happened. But I will say that through that disturbance, Aldea was resilient, including the building of this space that we're in right now, right? Which for 12 years has been a place of transformation, of inclusion, of belonging, of spiritual encouragement, of life change. And then something else happened. Another disruption came because Kevin, who had been leading Aldea for 25 years in total, including its time as Community Church of the Foothills, Kevin did something very courageous that I think we are all going to have the invitation to do at different points in our lives, is he responded to this inner call. And I also want to say that it's interesting telling someone else's story, and this is just my perspective as someone who has gotten to know Kevin and know Sylvia. I feel so honored to have been let in on their story. So this is my perspective, but I'm hesitant to tell someone else's story. But from my viewpoint, you have someone who, after 25 years of leading a community, responded to this courageous invitation within his own heart to say, hey, what's next? Because we all know that we have seasons in life, and then we have seasons changing, right? And so after 25 years, he responded to this call of his own life, and I honor that. But of course, in him announcing his retirement in 2019, it was another disruption. And then we all know what happened right after 2019, the pandemic, and who wasn't disrupted in some way, shape, or form by the pandemic. And now for us as an organization whose lifeblood is being in person, there was only so much pivoting that we could do, right? We weren't able to do what some organizations or companies were able to do during COVID. Has anyone heard of a ghost kitchen? Okay, so basically, there are places that they pivot in such a way where during COVID, they started selling products under a different name. I'll give you an example. There was a company called Pasquale's Pizza and Wings that conspicuously showed up during COVID and started selling food. And only later was it found out that Pasquale's was a shell corporation actually operating out of Chuck E. Cheese's. So and Pasquale's is still around, I think. So if you see Pasquale's, just know you just ordered Chuck E. Cheese and you thought, oh, I found some cool restaurant. So that's an example of a ghost kitchen. There are many in Tucson, beware, spooky. But the thing is that obviously Aldea, there's only so much pivoting we could do. We couldn't, do that. We didn't just start selling pizza and be like, we're something else, So this made COVID a challenging time. What do you do when you can't meet in person? I'll also say that during this time, a longtime friend of Aldea's stepped in to lead this community through this challenging and difficult time of uncertainty of how we would move forward, a time when communities all across the world were unsure of how to move forward. And Dave Fleming, who led this community during that time, just had an incredibly difficult task of figuring out what the next steps would be while not being able to meet in person. And so there were obstacles at that time that just could not be overcome. And so he did not continue, but I want to honor him as an integral part of our resilience journey. But it's something I think it's important for people to know, especially those of you who perhaps are newer, who've only been coming in the last couple of years, like me, right, who are within 2 years of your time here at Aldea. What you might not understand is that coming out of the pandemic, Aldea almost closed down. Right? The leadership team looked at the situation, right, and wondered, are we even going to be able to reopen? How many of you were kind of at that time, you were unsure, like, what's going on with Aldea? Are they going to come back? Are they, some people, right? Some people were hanging around wondering what's going to happen, right? And the leadership team didn't know either. And I share this just to say that the leadership team at this time had incredible hope in the resilience of this community, in what was possible in this community, and what could happen, and the people that had yet to be touched by this community. And they decided to move forward. And it was such a pivotal decision and pivotal moment. How many of us have moments in our lives where we look back and we go, oh my gosh, I almost gave up, right? I almost gave up on this relationship, or I almost gave up on this job. And you wonder what your life would have looked like if you had. And so for those of us who have only been here within the last couple of years, you are such a crucial part of this resilience journey because you are the seeds that were planted during a time when the forest seemed like it was burning down. So what have we learned about resilience today? We have this core of who we are, and disruptions and the disturbances of life are guaranteed. And yet we hold on to hope that a new normal is possible, even if it means letting go of some of how things used to be. So maybe for you noticed how in your life, the more difficulties came, the more life broke you apart. In some ways, it was pushing you into something new. And now as you look back and you think about how you found yourself, how you became the person you are, in some ways it was things falling away, like the shedding of skin. Brené Brown says you can't get to courage without walking through vulnerability, period, right? Friends, sometimes the only way that we discover our resilience is walking through moments and seasons and experiences that require us to be vulnerable, humble, to recognize that we don't have the answers, that we aren't certain. And through that, we find ourselves in a deeply powerful way. And I see in this the power of contrast, right? That vulnerability creates courage. The light is only known as light because of the dark, right? We appreciate the sunshine only during the rain. Or in Tucson, it might be the reverse. I don't know. We discover our resilience often only when we're given a reason to be resilient, right? We only can find that courage in those moments. And I think many of us in this place also have an aspect of spiritual resilience that we can recognize in our journeys. Things happened in our life, experiences, or maybe we observed things in the world, and it shifted our world on its axis. We knew that there was no going back to normal, going back to the perspective that we once had. And yet from that place of vulnerability, you found a courage to be able to push forward and say, I still have hope that there is a way of being in this life. There is a spirituality that might feel right for me, right? That I might find a place called home. And I think Aldea is a place that is home for the spiritually resilient, which makes sense to me then why our story would be one of resilience. Now, I will say that it's been this way all along because even before the pandemic, figuring out money was not an easy conversation back then, because in creating a space like Aldea, in so many ways we were clear on what we wouldn't do when it came to money. Specifically, we would never turn money into a dogma, right? How many of us have experienced some version of feeling as though our spiritual belonging and our spiritual well-being was directly tied to our finances? And we knew that this would never be who we were. And it's also just important to realize that Aldea in and of itself is something that is very rare still in this world. How many of us have kind of seen these articles coming out that Aldea have been participating in or have been featured in, and wow, you realize, oh my gosh, there aren't that many places like Aldea out there. I feel very lucky that here in Tucson, where we happen to live, it's, some people have come to me and they were reading these articles before they found us, and they were like, we're featured, Aldea is featured in the later part of some of these articles, and so they'd be reading these articles going, man, I wish there was a place like this here, and they got to the part where they realized there was something in Tucson, and it was such an exciting moment. But understanding that what Aldea is so rare has also just made it complicated in terms of figuring out how are we going to be resilient moving forward. So like you and I, Aldea as a community has been like a forest that's gone through many fires, right? Been like a desert, gone through many droughts. And yet we've had this resilience as a community, not because the idea of Aldea alone is enough to make us resilient, but it's because of the people. It's because of the community coming together and deciding that we are going to be resilient together. And that's why I found it, that I wanted to explore more of a scientific and nature-based explanation of resilience today rather than our usual way of understanding that word, because Aldea is an ecosystem, right? And it's something that we all participate in together. We all co-create together. And when we adapt together. Resilience is not saying, oh, I wish the forest didn't burn down, right? I wish this situation wasn't happening. Resilience is saying, let me be creative from a place of hope in what's possible. And friends, every day I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of the resilient story of Aldea, but it's truly not about me. It's about you. It's about us. It's about those in the past who have fought for this place and who have said, this place and something like this place needs to exist in the world, right? And so today, those of us who are here have the opportunity to dream about what's next and what the future will be like. And as we do, I just invite you to think about that person that is just like you, who was looking for a place just like this, but maybe they just have yet to find it. And when they do, it may change their life, right? It may be a space of healing and transformation. Maybe this is someone who's transgender or gay, and though the dominant culture, whether religiously or societally, lets them know that they're not accepted, that this can be a place where they find belonging. And they find that they are encouraged and inspired to realize that they are just as much of the divine as anybody else. Maybe that person who's yet to find this place is like me, who was convinced that spirituality was an essential part of being human, and yet I needed an alternative to what was offered to me out in the world. Bless you. And so as we think about what's next, I just encourage you to think about those people, about the impact that Aldea can have on a culture that I believe is crying out for spirituality, but for an alternative to the dominant religious order of the day, right? And so when we think about something like a pledge campaign, and the idea of what a pledge campaign is, in no way is it for you to belong here, you need to give a certain amount, or for you to maintain your spiritual health, your giving needs to look like this. It's really just to say that what is pledged determines the shape, the form, the direction of this community, right? The potential impact that this community may have. And so we're about halfway through our pledge. It ends on December 8th. And look at this. You guys have been so incredibly generous. We are over halfway through. And I just, yeah. And I just look at this and I see so much generosity, so much hope, so much belief in what's possible, so much resilience here. But of course, with the thermometer not filled, it's really just for me to say this isn't enough for us to continue through 2025 in the form that we're currently in. That isn't a matter of any pressure. It's just a matter of transparency. Because if you showed up here one day and we said, hey, we can't continue in the form that we're in, you'd want to know why, right? So that's why it's just a matter of transparency. Let's see. Okay, there you go. So if you're new here, right, and or perhaps you're just not in a place that you're thinking about pledging, then I hope that today we were able to share in this idea together that life guarantees disruptions. And in those disruptions, we don't just go back to the way things were, but like ecosystems, like nature does, of which we are a part, right? We can adapt. We can find a new normal and find a new normal that perhaps is leading us to a deeper courage. And so may we celebrate our resilience, and may we even celebrate the moments that required our resilience, because they are what brought us here today. They are what brought us through life. Now, if you are able to consider participating in the pledge campaign, I just want you to know that I believe that Aldea's resilience story is just beginning. But I know that we can't do it alone. And I think about the tens, hundreds, even thousands of people just like you and I who have yet to find this place. And it gives me so much hope and excitement for what that might look like, right? So if you're curious, if you want any more information, there is a brochure out in the giving table in the lobby that just explains how you can participate in the pledge campaign. You can go to our website, aldeaspiritualcommunity.org/pledge. But friends, I want to end with a benediction from the Irish poet John O Donohue. And he says this, and maybe if you'd like, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes, or if you'd just like to soak this in. May you have the courage to live the life that you would love to claim as your own. May you have the wisdom to ground yourself in the grace of the present moment. And may you have the strength to rise again, no matter how many times you fall.